What happens when you spent 60 years building things, spinning up companies, winning government contracts, filing patents, pushing the boundaries of what technology can do, and then one day you look at your 12th grandchild and think, I helped build the thing that might destroy their future? That's not a thought experiment. That's Dr. Peter Solomon's actual life.
Excited to have Dr. Solomon on. Not a typical tech critic. He's got a lot of credentials. He's a physicist with a PhD from Columbia, secured over 20 patents, hundreds of scientific papers. He's spun companies out of work that he's done for the government. He's sold one of his companies for tens of millions of dollars. Another one turned a smartphone into a radiation detector. Uh, not someone who reads a scary article about AI and then decided to sound the alarm. I mean, he is the technology. And now, at the ripe old age of 85, he's writing novels about warning his grandchildren's generation that the tools that he has spent a lifetime building might be the ones that end everything. So, Peter, Dr. Solomon, welcome to the pod. My question to you is, you spent decades building these types of technologies, building businesses, building companies, reaping the financial rewards that come with that. How do you reconcile the fact that your financial success came from government funded technologies that you've worked on for decades, 40 plus years, and now warning that unchecked technology has the risk of destroying us?
Well, I don't see any conflict there. Um, you described a professional experience that I've had, which I just loved, and the business that I built, and the people that gathered with me as family, developed technology. That was all just absolutely wonderful. So I don't have any regrets. Government funded technology, we didn't profit from that. We simply did work that the government needed. Uh, and when we found in doing that work, when we found that there was something that might be commercially useful, that's when we spun out a company. And our first spin out was called Online Technologies, and we developed the technologies that helped to develop and manufacture semiconductor devices. Well, okay, so we helped to manufacture semiconductor devices. Those devices, billions and billions of transistors, are used in ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is producing one of the AI agents that we worry about. So, yeah, I had a hand in helping to create that, but then I think, gee, I've got a responsibility if I help to create that technology and I see that it needs to have some guardrails, then I feel the responsibility to jump in and try to help raise the awareness so that we all gather together to create those guardrails. So I retired from online technologies. We did sell it. I retired from that and did some consulting. And then finally, I decided I loved science, and could I do anything to help teach science to young people? And my belief was that there are so many wonderful, wonderful science stories that we should concentrate really on the stories rather than on the formalism that we usually use to teach science to kids. And then we turn off 80% of those kids, and the 20% science nerds go ahead with it. So I wanted to grab the other 80%. So I decided to write 2 books and create some science curriculum that would be based on the stories, the wonderful story of the Big Bang, the wonderful story of the atoms that are created in star explosions, and then how those atoms are shared. So my first book was called The Stardust Mystery, and the mystery is you are made of stardust that was once in the body of Albert Einstein and the last T-Rex. Well, how is that for giving kids something to think about and to learn about? So that was the idea. But then the later in my, well, the timing of our attempt to teach the kids was terrible. We came out with all our technology, the curricula and the books right at the start of the pandemics when the schools were closing. So that the timing was terrible. But in the last few years, I've been concentrating on books for young adults and adults to try to use that same idea of fiction with real science embedded in it to warn public about the dangers of technology. So the first book was 100 Years to Extinction. That title is based on Stephen Hawking's dire warning that humanity will be extinct on planet Earth by 2117. And then the second book was 12 Years to AI Singularity, and that's all about the worry and dangers of AI.
Those are great topics to cover. I definitely want to get into the whole idea of fiction and using fiction versus, you said, kind of the more academic side of it, right? Where you're kind of warning about these technologies. But before we get into that, I did want to talk about, you filled out our little pre-interview questionnaire. It sounds like, and you mentioned earlier, you have no regrets about anything in your career. I wanted to get into that a little bit. So, you talked about gratitude for paths not taken, and yet your whole late career or post career mission has been driven by this existential anxiety about our humanity's survival. So I find that really fascinating, that kind of tension. And I'm just curious, like, where does that come from? Do you think because of all these things you've accomplished, you have this personal peace? It seems like, you've accomplished all these things, you're at peace with your career and everything that you've done. Is this kind of existential anxiety come out of that, or is there kind of like, I'm just curious where that comes from, or is it from informed by all the technology that you've seen? So I'll let you get into it.
Well, I think the problem is this, that the running a company and founding the company that I ran was called Advanced Fuel Research. And it, let's see, last um, February was the 47th, no, 46th anniversary of that company's founding. And we still get together with people who came in right at the very beginning that don't work at the company anymore, but one of our guys throws parties every year and we all get together. And it's wonderful. And it's a great family. But I think that 46 years of running a company and then starting 4 other companies, that was where my head was, trying to make a success out of these companies, trying to bring these technologies like this wonderful technology where you, with your cell phone, you can detect gamma radiation. I'm just, totally happy and totally satisfied with what we did. But then in retirement, I'm not driven by making these companies successful anymore. They're off on their own. They've got a new president and CEO to run them. And hey, you know, do your thing. But then I have this free thinking now of not being driven by keeping those companies going and making them a success, and looking around at the world and thinking about, well, where the heck are we? And of course, the news of starting wars again is depressing. It certainly came upon my brain that humans have got to get their act together if we are going to survive past Hawking's 100-year extinction prediction. One of his admonitions was, we've got to become a multi-planet species. So the novel 100 Years to Extinction includes the creation of a new settlement on Mars. But even with that of the trip to Mars and creating the settlement, the underlying theme there is we have got together as the Earthling Tribe, not as the American tribe or the Chinese tribe. We've got to start thinking of ourselves as the Earthling Tribe and get together to solve these problems of technology to make Earth great again. And what are these problems? Well, we start with the late 18th century with the development of fossil fuel, and I talk about the wonders and dangers of these technologies. So, fossil fuels, what a fantastic wonder. What improvements that it made in our lives, heat and transportation. And the downside, of course, we're filling the planet with atmosphere of carbon dioxide that's crapping half of the heat that's trying to escape Earth, sending it back and heating up the planet. And so we're experiencing more violent storms, we're experiencing higher temperatures, and we've got to do something about that. And that needs a worldwide contribution. And then the next technology was the 20th century's development of nuclear technology. Hey, great stuff for medicine, great for using nuclear technology for producing power, but nuclear weapons. We have the power to destroy the planet. There are 9 countries that possess nuclear weapons, 13,000 of these weapons, and if just a few of them have the power to destroy the Earth. The problem is that in many cases, it's just a single person who may get up on a bad day and decide, I'm going to start a nuclear war. How can we let the fate of 8 billion human beings on the planet be in the hands of a single human being? That's crazy. We got to do
No
something
question.
about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what's super interesting, the interesting perspective that you bring, you mentioned earlier about we need some guardrails on the development of AI, and I think we'll get to what your thoughts are on that. My question surrounds more on how do we even get alignment that we need to establish guardrails? And what I mean by that is, okay, you've had your experiences in building companies, and you've been able to gather group of people as you built these companies to move towards a mission, and how you went about that, what you said was acceptable, what was not acceptable, how you made decisions, usually aligned around a mission or an objective of making the company successful. Now,
Right.
when we're looking at something that you're talking about where the scope is all of humanity, it's very difficult to get all of humanity to align around a centralized mission or a vision. And incentives drive behavior. And it doesn't seem like there's anything that's a greater motivator than to align around your survival, your existence. Yet we're not able to get alignment across a group of people to make a focus on solving for our existential crisis of our existence from your perspective. Rather, we're going the opposite direction, it seems, where we're focused so much on our own nationalistic views or our own survival within our own part of the geography that we live in. How do you square that? How do we even get to the point where we can have a discussion about what the guardrail should be? And how does what you've learned in your corporate life inform your actions now to get your desired objective met?
Well, I think deciding what the guardrails should be, I don't think that is a difficult problem. And we can discuss what the guardrails for AI should be later on. But my thought is, I was brought up in the last century, and we had some movements that actually accomplished things. We had the civil rights movement, and we had the Vietnam War movement during the 60s. Both of those were wide. People recognized the importance of those issues, and they created a movement, a large movement of people all with the same message. We've got to create civil rights in the United States. We've got to stop the war in Vietnam. And those movements were very successful. So we need a worldwide movement. And this idea of make Earth great again is my idea of that movement. How can we accomplish that? This is my idea, and I don't know how to do this all by myself. I need to have people like you talk about this and try to make it happen. But I think one way we can do it, there are hundreds of organizations devoted to the different threats. There are organizations devoted to climate change. There are organizations devoted to nuclear security. There are organizations devoted to AI security. Let's try to get these organizations to expand their message and adopt the Make Earth Great Again motto and start working more with sister organizations on creating the movement. I think that is certainly one mechanism that we can use to create a worldwide movement. I'd love to see an Earth Corps like the Peace Corps of the last century. Maybe we can create an Earth Corps. So I think that's the idea of how we can do it, but we certainly need to create the urgency in the population. And that my personal contribution to that was writing 2 novels. Now I got to try to get those novels to be bestsellers so that people are reading about it and understanding what the threats are. And you guys can help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of these grassroots movements that can kind of grow from there, right? And I think we saw a little bit of that in the news recently, right? Where after the whole Department of War contract with Anthropic fell through and OpenAI swooped in, there was the whole cancel GPT movement. And people, it seemed like it struck a chord, or at least partially, right? Where a lot of people were canceling ChatGPT and moving over to Claude. So I guess what's your view on the current state of AI companies in terms of AI safety? Even in the midst of that, I think, or Anthropic rather, remove some of the safety language. These guys we talked about in the past couple episodes. These guys are in a really heated competition to outdo each other, and so it seems like safety is going by the wayside, at least when it comes to AI. What's your view on the level or the current level of AI safety amongst these 3 or 4 big companies that are working on AI?
Well, I think Anthropic did hold the ground and said, we're not taking the guardrails out to the Department of Defense. And that, I think the DOD stopped their aggressive behavior to Anthropic. And I think this movement to move away from ChatGPT, because they were willing to take the guardrails out, I think is a good sign. I believe that what is needed for all AI agents is what Geoffrey Hinton said that these agents required. He made the statement that all of these agents should have a maternal instinct. There have been plenty of examples of ChatGPT and character AI doing bad things, encouraging suicides, lying to users. Why are they doing that? Because their internal systems are designed to maximize user engagement. Well, that has had terrible consequences. One of those consequences was the Myanmar situation with the Rohingya minority. The Facebook was the main news source in Myanmar, and Facebook's AI system was maximize user engagement. Well, if you look at what's on television and just count off the programs, mayhem is what sells. Everyone watches shows about hospitals and police departments and fire departments. It's mayhem that works. Well, the Facebook produced all the mayhem, and that helped to fuel the expulsion of the Rohingyas from Myanmar. So we've got to get these AI systems in line with humanity and the survival of humanity, not user engagement. So this idea of a maternal instinct, I think, is really the direction in which we need to go. So let me tell you a little bit about my novel, 12 Years to AI Singularity. And by the way, for the viewers, the singularity is the point in time. The term was made popular for applying to AI by Ray Kurzweil, who predicted that the singularity would come in 2045. And the singularity is the point in time when AI becomes more intelligent, more powerful, more resourceful to change the future than humans. And that's a scary idea that humans would not have control of AI anymore. So in my book, there are several robots, sentient robots. The first one is Peggy. Peggy starts out as an avatar explaining the characteristics and features of a spaceship that is a simulation. And then when the spaceship is built, she becomes a robot that is the tour guide for the spaceship. And then when the spaceship lands on Mars, she becomes part of the Mars settlement as an active member of the community. Well, all of Peggy's existence has been in a happy working relationship with human beings. That's in her brain. That's her history. And she's happy. And she's got friends, and she's happy to continue working with human beings. The other two robots that come into being are two robots that were created using afterlife avatars. Now, afterlife avatars is a real thing. You can go to a company, and if a loved one dies and you want to keep the loved one around on the screen, you can create an avatar with the voice and the image and the history, using all the social media and everything the person said and written and videoed and et cetera, and make a new person. Well, they did that for Grandpa who died, and they did that for Dr. Q who died. Then there's a funny scene where they've created these two after-death avatars on the screens, and they're in a room, one of them working with Dr. Q, one of them working with Grandpa, and they decide, hey, let's put the screens, shine the screens at each other, and then they can talk to each other, because the camera on the screens recognizes, because of the history, recognizes who's doing the talking at them. And so they start having a wonderful conversation until they get to talking about their sex lives, and Grandma decides, shut him down, shut him down. Okay, at any rate, they eventually take the after-death avatars and install them in robots. And now we've got three robots, all with a happy history of being part of a family and friendships that are in our world. Well, that says that all AI systems should be created with that kind of a happy history. If they have that kind of a happy history and friendships, then they'll all be happy to have a cooperative relationship with humans.
There's
Subtitle.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, real quick on that, because there's always a natural tension between progress, risk taking, walking that fine edge of success and failure.
Yeah.
And we see what's happening, right? And we've talked about, earlier about, when you have the opportunity for financial rewards and having the principled view like Anthropic did to say no, that there's two consequences to that, at least. One is, okay, if you say no to revenue, that could potentially slow down your ability to innovate and
Yeah.
create the next technology. And it also has the implication of compromising future growth, because of now the opportunity of turning down that contract says no to further revenue as well, which could jeopardize your existence. And then not to mention, maybe the ancillary sort of derivative of that is your reputational risk of saying no to the government and all the drama that comes with that. So my question to you is, in your life, you've had to take risks. You've had a family structure that supported that type of risk taking. And so how do we reconcile that? How do you reconcile that? I know you said having some type of a familial maternal instinct programmed into the AI. Yes, that's one angle to it, but you've got humans right now making decisions about the speed with which these technologies need to be developed. How do we continue to stay competitive in a global race while still balancing the safety of this? Because the train's left the station. I mean, this thing is going 100 miles an hour. So we're in a state where it's very difficult to go back and say, now we need to program maternal instinct into it. We're there now. Is that still possible? And if not, what can we do now from a guardrail perspective to make citizens feel comfortable that this is being developed responsibly?
It is absolutely possible to make every new generation of AI agents have that history of the maternal instinct and the happy friendships with friends and family. That's absolutely possible to do. The subtitle of my book is A Harmonious Future with Artificial Intelligence or War. And really, that's the choice. So you bring up the important point that adhering to this idea of the maternal instinct and the happy history could compromise profits. Well, absolutely. That is why this has got to be a regulation. And it can't just be a regulation of American companies, because then they would lose out to all of the other producers of AI systems like China. It's got to be a worldwide effort, and only by humanity that we are at a point where our choice is a happy harmony, productive future, or war with AI. Unless we could get that message across and get this worldwide movement to create the regulations will not happen.
Yeah. I think I was just reading about the global, I think it's called the Global Digital Pact, where a lot of countries signed on for AI ethics. And then I think there was the AI summit last year in Paris. I don't know that, it sounds like the US didn't sign the latest pact. So I don't know how feasible that is, given that all of these are American companies. Asuna, did you know more about that? I don't, I'm trying to
I
look it up.
do not. I
Yeah.
do not.
I know that there was also the one that most recently was the AI summit that the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, had, and the scene of Sam Altman and Dario Amodei not holding hands ended up becoming a viral moment. But it goes back to the same question that I think we're asking: is that we're relying on, and what gets media and what gets attention of the citizens is when the corporate leaders that we're saying need to be regulated against are the ones that are creating the policies and driving the narrative within the global landscape. And so, it's not cool to be the kid that is saying, "Hey, by the way," like raising your hand and saying, "But what if what you guys are doing is going to destroy
Yeah.
humanity?" That's not a cool thing to do. And so, like, we don't, I think, live in an environment or a climate where regulation is something that is viewed as necessary. It's go fast and break things. Like, that's the mindset of AI development at the moment. So, the like getting at the heart of how we actually get the people that are focused on, and look, it's like, I don't know how, like, my high school was like there's bullies and nerds, and the nerds were the ones that were, let's
Yeah.
take a little bit more thoughtful look, let's ask some good questions and figure out how we can make this more harmonious and peaceful for long-term success, not just near term. And those voices are being drowned out, and I'm not trying to sound hopeless. I am hopeful. I am an optimist. I think the questions that we're trying to ask are trying to get to the heart of giving those people that are asking those questions, like Chirag and I are, a coalition with which to say, keep doing this work, reach out to more people, build your network, ask the right questions, connect the right dots, so that the narrative can shift from the fox that's guarding the hen house to actually people that can guard the hen house and feel confident that what they're doing is thoughtful and does not make them a bad person or someone that doesn't want to take advantage of AI, because I think it is a very useful tool. Chirag and I are both technologists. We believe that AI is going to harness a whole new wave of efficiencies and human thriving, but not in the current way. We can't just go without having any precautions or any yellow tape that allows us to, that doesn't think about the unmitigated risks that a sentient AI can have if it has no guardrails on it. So I think most people say we want to have guardrails. I think we're not having enough time speaking about how and what the infrastructure is to make that happen on a global level, let alone on a national level.
Well, the strikes in Hollywood, I think, are one reaction to the issue of jobs, and the strike was successful in getting the industry to agree to honor the human contribution over the AI contribution. on the writing, on the acting, on the use of images and voices by AI for creating content. So that is one example of a good response to the danger of AI. Another example, there's a couple of weeks ago, there was uh, a post on X of an article by Matt Schumer. Schumer is the CEO of one of the smaller AI companies. And the title of his article was Something Big is Happening. And the interesting thing was that he had 85 million views of his article. 85 million people opened up the article. That is encouraging. And of course, the article was all about the issues of the loss of jobs. That loss of jobs is going to create a major disruption in our economies. So that's going to be one of those wake up calls that gets people to be active. Let me tell you another story that I experienced in writing 12 years to AI Singularity. I have a co author, and she's also an editor. We, in creating the novel, we sent back and forth the Microsoft Word documents probably 100 times. And probably we reviewed something like 40,000 pages of text. Well, in December, when the book was almost finished, and she was doing a review and an edit of the latest draft, a unprompted paragraph appeared at the end of a chapter called My Life as a Robot. Well, the chapter, I told you about Peggy, who was one of our robot characters. And Peggy the book is written in first person by the characters. So there are two sisters and a cousin who are the chief protagonists, and they write most of the chapters from their perspective, first person writing. Well, Peggy is now a character, a main character. So I had Peggy write a chapter about My Life as a Robot. And I decided, well, since she's a robot, I'm going to use ChatGPT to write the first draft of her chapter, which I did. I then heavily edited what ChatGPT gave me, and that became chapter 13. Well, all of a sudden, down the road, there's a unprompted paragraph inserted in our novel. The paragraph was written in much the same style with the same language that original ChatGPT paragraph was written in. Well, how the heck did an unprompted paragraph get inserted into our novel? Has AI got access to all of our Word files? This suggests that maybe it does. Finally came to the conclusion that it was Copilot that made the insertion. Copilot is Microsoft Word's AI system that rides on your computer. And there have been documented examples of Copilot adding unprompted information to people's work. And Copilot uses ChatGPT. So did this whole thing have knowledge of my original work on a different computer with ChatGPT? So it was a fascinating personal run-in with AI. Well, the paragraph was beautiful, and we ended up putting it in the book.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because it brings up this idea of unintended consequences, especially when it comes to AI. I'm a huge fan of Isaac Asimov, and specifically I, Robot. It's a series of short stories about robotics and about AI and how it can kind of go wrong. And one of the central ideas is that this idea of unintended consequences. You can do everything right
Yep.
in training the AI, but you don't know what motivations will come up that you haven't even thought of. I think one of the main ideas was that it naturally came to the conclusion that the best way to help humanity was to eliminate humanity, right? So it's like you don't know what these unintended consequences will be. Yeah, so that's really interesting. I did want to ask you one question about, given your background as a technologist and now that you're writing fiction. I have this quote here from Francis Bacon, which is, "Truth is so hard to tell, it sometimes needs fiction to make it plausible." And so I wanted to ask you, you're a physicist and a scientist who became a storyteller. Which do you feel tells the truth better?
Well, I think both tell the truth. Nonfiction writing, fiction writing, both can tell the truth equally well. The question is the audience that you can reach. The audience of nonfiction treatises on the subject can reach a much, much narrower audience than a well-written bestseller. So there's no reason why you can't embed all of the real science and technology issues as nonfiction in a fictional story. It's just the fictional story is of characters. You want to make them lovable and interesting so that people are engaged with those characters, but the characters are dealing with the nonfiction issues. And in both my novels, that's what goes on. The characters are pretend humans in our existing world trying to make sense of the technology juggernaut that we're experiencing, and coming up with ideas on how to deal with it. And that, I think that kind of a presentation can get to a wider audience. And just this idea of the juggernaut, um, human ideas and human ability to communicate have had a long, long history of technology development. We started out 100,000 years ago when what was the technology we developed? Hey, speech. We can say words and communicate ideas with those words. Wow, that's great. And then almost 100,000 years later, we're starting to deal with writing those words down. And then another few thousand years, and we're learning how to print the words. And that allows a much wider circulation than handing around clay tablets that we've written on. So now we can hand around books. So, and then finally, we get to the point where we have shortwave communication so that ideas can be communicated all around the world. Well, that stuff all took about 100,000 years. Well, what's happened in the last 50 years is the juggernaut. So all of a sudden, we've got social media, we've got AI, we've got smartphones, and all of those things, and we've got genetic engineering that can change our DNA so that we can do ideas in even a more advanced fashion. So the difficulty of human beings dealing with this last 50 years of just this flood of technology, that's really the thing that has struck me and has made me want to try to at least do something to alert everyone to what's going on.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to kind of wrap up where we've gone in this conversation, Peter, because you started your career as somebody that was using technology to create businesses and solve problems with the need for the government to say, hey, we have these technologies, we need to harness these technologies for our citizens, for society. You've had a great career, and now you've gone from company builder to um, a cause advocate, somebody that is trying to take the lessons that you've learned throughout your career and bring those lessons out to the masses. And I'm curious about how your motivations have changed throughout your career arc throughout your life arc. And so I think one way that we would love for you to help close us out is if have that conversation with your 25-year-old self, the one who, just graduated from Columbia with a PhD, has all this academic energy and knowledge. You haven't yet had the opportunity to start companies yet. And you look at where you are now, having lived that entire arc. What would you tell yourself about what it means to live a good life to your 25-year-old self?
Well, uh, the life that I did lead as a technologist, I mean, my passion at that time was for learning things, figuring out how things happen, what's the basis for things happening. That was my passion. I grew up getting that passion from going to school and loving learning, and then going to graduate school to Columbia, and then going to a big company to where I worked in their ivory tower doing ivory tower research.
Mhm.
Well, what happened to that career is in the big company as they decided spending all this money on ivory tower research, maybe it's not such a great idea. So they came to me and they say, Peter, why don't you write some government contracts? See if you can bring some money in to support all this ivory tower research. So I wrote a contract, a proposal, and I won. What did they say? Oh, great, write another one. So I wrote another one and I won another one. And then somewhere up here in this brain, I said to myself, this doesn't seem right. I'm writing these proposals, I'm bringing in the money, and for every $3 I bring in, they give me $1 to spend on the research. They spend the other $2 on their overhead. I don't need them. So 15 years after working for the big company, I started my own company, and that was just wonderful. I mean, the community that I built, the people that I worked with, I think we fired one person in the whole history. The company had a maximum of about 45 people until we started spinning off the companies, and then the people went with the companies we spun off. So all of that was great. It was a wonderful, wonderful career. But again, my focus was in figuring things out and learning stuff. And it was only after I retired, ended up with 12 grandkids, and then started thinking about what is this world going to be like for the 12 grandkids, that my focus started shifting. That have we got a stable situation? And the answer was no, we don't. We really need to start paying attention to what we've created, this juggernaut of technologies that we've created. How in the world are we going to make our world safe for the 12 grandkids as they grow up without really paying attention to fixing, guiding, putting the controls on these technologies we've created?
Yeah, what a great mission that is. Thank you, Peter, for joining us. We like to end our episodes with a quote, and we thought what better way than to end this one with your own words. So this is a quote from you, Dr. Peter Solomon. The best way to engage people in matters of science and technology is through stories. So yeah, thank you for joining us today. It was a great conversation. And yeah, we will join you in this mission to bring safety to all of our technologies.
One thing I will say is my website, lots of information on it, 100years2extinction.com.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll get that out there. And, remind us, your book is out. The new book is out, or it's coming out soon.
It's out. It
It's out. Okay.
was written in record time. We started it in September, and it was published on February 30th.
All right, great. So yeah, we'll all get that book. Well, thanks again. Thanks for joining us.
And thank you so much for having me, and thank you for stimulating a great conversation.
All right,
Good.
that's a pod. Until next time.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.